Chicago corner Jaylon Johnson is now entering the final year of his rookie deal, and that means it's time to start talking about a potential extension. So I dove into Johnson's tape, and as I started researching, the answer seemed obvious. Jaylon Johnson is very clearly a good corner. He's gone toe-to-toe with some of the NFL's best, and while he's not Darrelle Revis shutting guys down out there, he is making their lives harder and consistently steals back downs for his defense. Nothing's easy against the former second-round pick, whether it's man coverage or zone coverage, short throw or deep throw, whether he has safety help or whether he's totally by himself, Jaylon Johnson threatens to undo whatever the offense wants to do whenever he's targeted, which obviously deserves an extension. But as I kept digging, the situation only got muddier and muddier, and now I have no idea what's about to happen between Jaylon Johnson and the Bears. We've got a lot to talk through today, including Jaylon Johnson's strengths and weaknesses as a player, his scheme fit and role within the Chicago Bears defense, and how that relates to his extension conversations within the broader scope of corner within the NFL. So let's dive right in and start by breaking Jaylon Johnson down. The name of Jaylon's game is versatility. Tons of corners in the NFL these days are a man corner that can play a little bit of zone or a zone corner that can play a little bit of man, but Jaylon Johnson's comfortable playing press man cover 1, playing the flat defender role in cover 2, and dropping deeper in cover 3 or cover 4 roles, and from an offense's perspective, that makes him a very tough corner to read pre-snap. He might be jamming you and playing cover 1 press man, or from the same alignment, he might pass you off to the safety and hunt underneath as a flat defender in cover 2. You'd think this alignment would be safe to read as a clear tell for a cover 4 split field defense, but don't be so hasty because Jaylon Johnson can drive out of this same formation and cut off a route underneath. And as soon as you finally think you've got Jaylon dead to rights, like this clear cover 3 alignment against AJ Brown, one of the best receivers in the NFL, Jaylon reminds you he's more than just a shell game corner as he fades into the back corner of the end zone and fluidly tips away what should have been a touchdown pass. Take a look at this play one more time as we start digging into Jaylon's traits. We're going to use a lot of scouting speak here, but one of the first things I want to talk about is that Jaylon starts this play off as he needs to, with a quick collision that disrupts AJ Brown's route. It's not much contact, but it doesn't have to be. Simply making sure the receiver can't run the route exactly like he does in practice goes a long way towards disrupting the quarterback and receiver's timing and giving Jaylon Johnson exactly the type of throw he wants to defend. Because we're in the red zone, there's not enough space for a throw all the way over the top, so after Jaylon's jam, he quickly flips his hips and manages space up the sidelines, looking for a lower throw that he might just be able to get a hand on. And with Hurts' timing disrupted just enough, the throw comes in a bit behind Brown and Jaylon's able to get a hand on it to knock the ball away. It's a really nice play from the corner at an important time in the game. Jaylon's versatility isn't a fluke. He's got many of the traits of both man and zone corners, including plenty of physicality in press coverage that he uses to shut down short routes and disrupt longer routes alike. You'd never know he's only about 190 pounds because he plays so big against receivers like AJ Brown and Terry McLaurin, and he has a habit of showing up on big downs like this 4th and 6 against the Eagles that he shuts down outright. His anticipation is really something as a zone defender. I've heard it called click to close, and his click is exceptional. Whether he's watching the receiver or watching the quarterback's eyes, he tends to begin his break on the football as the quarterback is beginning his throw, and that's exactly what you want to see out of a zone defender. He's not always balanced coming out of his breaks, and this can create problems on slants and digs, but we'll get to that later. The anticipation is a plus, and it affects all kinds of plays. A lot of physical corners lack feel in zone coverage, but Jaylon Johnson doesn't have that issue and manages space really wonderfully. You'll rarely see Johnson standing in a zone covering nobody. He constantly looks for work, and what I'm most impressed with is when he knows he's being put in a position of conflict, places himself in high danger areas to force the quarterback to hesitate just a little bit and create the kind of confusion that can lead to mistakes. He's also aggressive when he needs to trigger downhill on runs and swing screens, and that anticipation we talked about earlier really starts to shine. I'm not about to pretend he's the best tackler in the world, but he does enough to to disrupt almost every play he's involved with, and while he's not a particularly strong run defender, at least he can set the edge decently on most plays and turn the run back upfield where somebody else can make the tackle. For a defense that wants to have long cover 2 corners that can play the flat well and still drop back in cover 3 when needed, Jaylon Johnson is pretty much a perfect fit for the Bears, and you can tell the Bears thought really highly of him because while most corners in the NFL, including the great ones like Sauce Gardner, Jair Alexander, Jamel Dean, and more, will play one side of the defense regardless of which threats come their way, Jaylon Johnson actually shifted sides depending on where the other team's best receiver was, be it A.J. Brown, Terry McLaurin, Devontae Parker, or whoever else he faced, and ended up playing about 30% of his snaps at left corner despite being a right corner for most of his career, which only further speaks to his versatility. It was a tough role the Bears asked him to play last year, but despite that, he continued to steal downs back in almost every game he played, and his competitiveness really shined through as even when he was put in matchups that shouldn't favor him, like this one against Amon-Ra St. Brown on an inbreaker with way too much space for Goff to throw into, Jaylon undercut the route and just barely got a hand on it, knocking the pass away, forcing a huge third down in the process. There's also a dramatic difference in the way that opposing offenses treat Jaylon Johnson as opposed to other Bears corners, where they act relaxed and comfortable as if they're running routes on air at times, but against Jaylon Johnson, the margin for error tightens up, and suddenly you see throws placed a little bit too close to the sideline, or maybe a pass gets dropped after a physical route where you've got to toe tap the sidelines and just can't haul the ball in, or maybe a wayward check down throw where Jaylon's presence seems to disturb the quarterback-receiver connection and the ball falls too far inside and on the turf. Nothing's easy when you're attacking Jaylon Johnson. You'll complete a pass against him occasionally, but it's going to take a great throw from the quarterback and a great catch from the wide receiver like this play against Devontae Parker. And as a 24-year-old playing such a heavy defensive role in the Bears defense, it seems like an extension would be a no-brainer, right? Let's quickly cover his weaknesses just to be sure. Look, in the day and age of extreme speed at wide receiver, Jaylon Johnson is one step too slow at times. He's not the kind of guy that'll recover downfield if he's beat badly, and a strong-arm quarterback can punish him if a play goes on for too long, whether that's the pass rush's fault or not. Disrupting the wide receiver's route is the only shot he has against these speedy receivers like Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. If the offense finds a way to make sure Jaylon can't land his hands, Tyreek's going to be wide open and the throw's going to come through in time and Jaylon doesn't have a chance. But if he does collision the receiver, chances are he'll throw off the throw's timing and he can work himself back into the play just like he did here. We're talking about being one step too slow, not 4 steps, don't over-exaggerate this, but because of how fast the NFL's getting at wide receiver, this often leaves him 1 or 2 steps too far back in his stance, which gives him trouble on those slants and ins we talked about earlier. He'll compete on those routes, especially if the throw comes out late, but those routes give him more trouble than any other routes in the route tree. And while he is anticipatory enough to break on these routes as best as he can, the balance issues we mentioned earlier occasionally crop up and create an easier completion for the offense than I think Jaylon would like. There's also the issue of injuries, as Jaylon has missed games so far in each of his first 3 seasons. Despite being only 24, Jaylon Johnson's already had 3 shoulder surgeries, 2 on his left shoulder in college and 1 on his right labrum in the NFL. And while I don't expect his 2022 quad and finger injuries to be a problem going forward, he's likely going to miss some time due to injury at each of his future seasons, or at least that's what you should plan for. Also, I'm venturing totally into speculation here, but Jaylon Johnson is an unusually poor tackler that doesn't seem to want to wrap as he tackles. He's a decent enough shoulder tackler and, at the very least, consistently disturbs runners enough that someone else can come make the tackle if he misses, but he's such a consistent shoulder tackler that I can't help wondering if his shoulders potentially bother him when he tries to wrap up. Though he does use his arms and shoulders when he's setting the edge of the run game, so I don't know. You tell me your thoughts in the comments below, because I'm not going to make any definitive claims. Maybe the guy just loves to tackle with his shoulder. But overall, while these weak areas do create issues, they don't get in the way of a good corner playing well in an extraordinarily tough role within the defense. Jaylon simply has too many reps on tape where he's too competitive with players that either have a size or speed advantage, and he still manages to create an incompletion out of what easily could have been a completed pass. Do I think he gets asked to do too much at times? Absolutely, and hopefully as Kyler Gordon steps forward and Tyreek Stevenson moves into the defense, the Bears can leave him on the right side and let him stay stay there, because the end of that Week 10 Lions game showed that when he doesn't get the chance to collision somebody while playing the nickel spot, which he's not accustomed to, your results can be disastrous. But on the whole, Jaylon Johnson is a very good corner and still exactly the kind of player that you'd want to extend. And with Kyler Gordon, Tyreek Stevenson, and Jaquan Brisker all on rookie deals, the Bears DB room is cheap enough that it's the perfect time to offer an extension to a player like Johnson that's proved himself. But the biggest problem that both the Bears and Jaylon Johnson are going to have to solve is what is his value, because it's way more complicated than meets the eye. Think about this from two perspectives. One, as the Bears GM Ryan Poles trying to get the best deal possible for his team, and the other as Jaylon Johnson's agent, who actually doesn't have a name yet. Jaylon Johnson's between agents, but will be looking to maximize the potential earnings for his client. Ryan Poles knows that Jaylon Johnson's 24 years old and is already playing a cornerback 1 role for his team, but he also knows he has 1 interception in 3 years of play so far and hasn't finished his season yet, which is unquestionably going to take him out of the conversation as a $20 million market setter. So where does that leave Jaylon Johnson in the eyes of Ryan Poles? Well, if you take a look at the existing corner contracts, the drop-off between elite cornerback 1 and pretty doggone good CB is massive from a money perspective. The top 5 corners in the NFL all make around $20 million, and then 3 contracts later, suddenly the 9th best corner in the NFL isn't even making $15 million, representing an almost 25% pay cut. And while you might argue that a lot of these deals are old and therefore irrelevant, Darius Slay and Jamel Dean just signed new money and they didn't break $15 million either. Darius Slay is 32 years old, so he doesn't really compare to an up-and-comer like Jaylon Johnson, but Jamel Dean, who's just now finished his 4th season in the NFL, absolutely does, and he just took a deal for $13 million average value and could give Jaylon Johnson real trouble. I love Jaylon Johnson, but it's hard to argue right now he's a better player than Jamel Dean. And if you don't want to just take my word for it, know that in their first 3 seasons, Dean played more games, had more pass defenses, had more solo tackles, and maybe most importantly, had 4 more picks than Jaylon Johnson did, which could spell trouble for Johnson during negotiating. Because from his agent's perspective, we're talking about a 24-year-old corner with his whole career out in front of him, already playing a cornerback 1 role in the Bears defense, and has pretty much made himself indispensable as far as the future goes for Chicago. Justin Fields' rookie contract isn't going to last forever, so unless you think you can replace Jaylon Johnson next year with an effective free agent or a rookie that hits the ground running, the Bears could be back to starting Kindle Vildor during what they hope will be their Super Bowl competition years. You don't have to be obsessed with Jaylon Johnson to see that that's a negotiating position of major leverage. But because Jamel Dean signed the deal that he did, I don't know how you can make the case that Jaylon Johnson's worth any more than best case scenario Darius Slay's money, which you're only offering to Johnson if you assume that because he's 24, he's going to continue to get better. And hey, he might. But I have to imagine that Johnson's actual value right now is somewhere between 12 and best case scenario $15.5 million a year, and I just don't know if that's a deal Jaylon will take. Things change fast in football, so if Jaylon Johnson hires an agent and the Bears work out an extension, I will be enthralled. I would love to see him as part of the Bears going forward. But the longer I look at this situation, the more it reminds me of the Bears standoff with Allen Robinson just a few years ago, when a very good receiver wanted to get paid like a great receiver and the Bears wouldn't do it. Though I do think Robinson had a better case for the money at the time because at least he had great production, whereas Jalen's counting stats and PFF grades, I'm not saying they matter, but the things that aren't tape, the things that you can sell to an owner, don't point well for Jaylon right now, and I just don't know what his value would actually be on the open market. Overall, I really like Jaylon Johnson, but this extension could be tough to hammer out for both parties because Jaylon probably has to accept that his value isn't what he hoped it would be. Now, maybe Jaylon decides that he wants to wait until Trevon Diggs' latest extension comes out, which will likely put him in that $20 million category, but that's a big risk for a player that's injured as often as he is. A couple injuries here or there, and his value could be nothing close to what it is right now at this point in the offseason before a snap gets taken in week 1. It doesn't help anything that the Bears' edge rushers aren't really any better than they ended the last season with, and while Gervon Dexter and Zach Pickens may add a little bit of youth and juice to the interior, the Bears' pass rush could still be bottom 5 in the league, and that doesn't spell great things for a young corner looking to have a statement season. But But I love Jaylon Johnson personally, and any extension he signs for less than $17.5 million per year will make me smile, because in a day and age of dominating wide receiver talent, you need corners that can match or at least contest passing games, or you're eventually going to give up 17 straight completions to Kirk Cousins. Also, having a corner that you're comfortable with on an island, even in just some scenarios, lets you shift a little bit extra safety help towards the rookie Tyreek Stevenson and sophomore Kyler Gordon, and that just helps the Bears defense get off the field that few more times a game. But what do you think? Have I convinced you one way or another? Would you extend Jaylon Johnson? If so, what's your pricing ceiling? Let me know in the comments below. Give this video a like if you enjoyed it. If you thought I rambled too much, please let me know. And until next time, thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you later.